from Liam's school.
He still did farmers and ones he had on Sunday.
Yeah, bars. So if you want them, you can take them home even later.
No, they do that. Oh, he'll probably be here anyway.
Maybe.
We can do that.
Okay, that's right. It's been so long since we did this. I was like, oh, how do I do this? How do I make it all work? But I do believe we are all happening. Got it. Okay. Wish there was a way to mount this camera right there.
Instead of under the table.
I mean, the reality is, I guess, that it's supposed to be on the screen of reading the text anyway. It's
Right.
not gonna be seeing much of us.
Watching our feet.
Yeah.
We lost something out. Because there you lost something. You're looking in your bag.
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to find my glasses.
Oh, that would be handy.
Okay, get me a small backpack.
A
There's too
smaller
many
bag.
pockets in here.
Right.
I keep,
You only need them when you go shopping.
make moves and things. But there's no lost in the bag.
You know, I've just put more water in there, but I turned it back up.
No, that's fine.
So see if it's hot yet, I don't know.
So, no Murray. Cliff has apologized.
Oh, you just said Cliff would be here. Margaret's not coming because her food delivery comes at the same
Yeah.
time. So Patricia, if we're lucky, right?
She said she'd be here, but she'd be late.
Because
Poor Cliff, the guy, so he's been having back pain lately. And so he went to his doctor and the guy says, all right, here you go, here's some pain meds. And so then he feels great. Then he goes to yoga and overdoes it and wakes up the next day going,
Can't
oh,
Can't move.
pain meds poor, I'm in trouble.
Right. Or he's cutting back on his pain meds to see how he can cope
Sure.
with or without them. So twice a day he's been taking osteo or whatever. And so yesterday he said, I didn't take them this morning. And then just to test them, I walked to Penshurst back. Okay. And then just took some at night.
Morning.
Nobody's here. Waiting for you.
That's got a bit of a curve on it, isn't it?
That's your eyes, then.
No,
Ah,
I'm standing here,
What are you looking at?
so that it seems to be capturing more than what it's actually facing.
Well, the lens is curved.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that makes sense.
okay.
I'm not sure what it is.
Well, the edge of the
Yeah,
is about there, but you can still see me.
yes.
And Todd just said that the lens is curved.
Got
Is this a new one that's going?
the screen?
Hmm.
No. Well, we've had it for a few months.
It's new compared to the old one that died.
That's right.
It's new compared to the TV screen that you would just.
Oh,
What
the
was that called?
projector screen?
Yeah.
Richard Northman's been cleared, I see. I haven't been here.
Yep. Got rid of a bunch of stuff.
Oh, we had a work party while you were gone.
Yes.
Got a few things out then. Clearing of things.
Was it wet?
Was it wet? No,
It wasn't wet.
no, it was sunny. We thought it might be, but it wasn't. Kristen and Liam wiped down all the chairs in here because we realized that that hasn't happened.
Okay.
And he chopped off some branches around the back for me and was weeding, and
He had his pizza, did he?
Dylan didn't, but Zach helped Todd carry stuff out of this room and.
Yeah, Zach had the odd job role of go do this. All right, yeah, okay, go do that. And he's the one who also listed the big white cabinet, filing cabinet on
Oh, yeah,
Facebook.
and it went.
Yeah, we got $50 for the filing cabinet.
No.
Yeah,
Excellent.
the
Should have
And-
done the cabinet down in the kitchen at the same time. Well, you said you tried and maybe Zach needs to do it.
did he ask money for
Mhm.
it? The filing cabinet we asked money for, the white, junk cabinet. We just gave it away, but the filing cabinet was one of those deals where everybody wanted it at the same time. Like there was no activity on it for 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden, so a guy texts me saying, I'm interested. Can you, had a couple questions. So the next morning I come over here to take some photos and answer his questions. And as soon as I send that to him, somebody else comes back saying, I want it. I'll pay you right now. Transfer money, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay. I didn't respond. I gave the guy about an hour to actually respond. He didn't. So I said to the lady, I said, all right, well, fine, there you go.
No, that's true.
So later that day, like 5 o'clock or whatever, the guy comes back and he makes a further comment. Then another person asks if it's available. So I go into the listing and change it to sold. And the other two people now are like, well, wait a second. Well, I wanted it. I'm like, well, you didn't say that. You didn't say you wanted it. So anyway, the lady, the first one, the second person, I guess it was, shows up, $50, all good. I asked, no, I asked her though, I said, are you reselling this or is this for you? She goes, oh no, it's for my husband. Apparently he's got some office that she thinks it'll fit the decor of. I'm surprised.
They did know that it wasn't very functional. I mean, they needed a bit of work on it. Somebody might have been able to fix it up.
I mean, yeah, it's
I found the drawers very frustrating.
Was that the wooden one?
Yeah,
It's a nice looking.
yeah, well, I
Cabinet.
mean, it's obviously, what do they call them?
Vintage.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's actually an antique, but it's,
I thought for sure some antique dealer was gonna be the one who wanted it. That was my guess. I was wrong. Didn't come out on the first floor.
Ah.
That's true. It did not. Well, I was stalling a little bit for Jen, but apparently I'm guessing she's getting our lunches ready. So we'll just start. She can catch up. So my goal for today, I have more slides than I would normally feel comfortable with, but I want to finish the book,
So have you got Zoom people on? Can you tell or not? 'Cause
I have YouTube people on,
Gay was very keen.
which she's not on Zoom, but she might be on YouTube. Because there's two people watching on YouTube. Cliff's probably one of them.
Does she know how to do YouTube?
I don't know.
Well, because she said she couldn't figure it out. or it wasn't
you might be in the picture. I wasn't.
It should be on there now. I mean, we're the only ones on the Zoom part of the call, but the Zoom is live streaming to YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Let's see if Gay sent an email. No, but Baringa. Okay. So yeah, that's doing its thing. I'm trying to think, I wonder if I have Gay's.
I don't know where to look for it. Do you need YouTube?
Hang on.
Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, she knows about it happening, so she must have that information.
Search for 12,000.
No, it had to be Hurstville New Church because that's what this is being streamed on.
Ah, okay, that's what you touch.
It keeps correcting itself to I.
I have 3 emails for her. So, all right, just tell her I'm sending an email and there's a link. All right, well, that stalled enough for Jen to get here. Okay, oh, I need to share the screen. You starting the class now. So the idea here is to finish the second half of the back half of Conjugial Love. So you may recall, you may not, last time we dealt with topics. There's Gay. So last time it was looking at things in opposition to conjugal love, fornication, prostitutes, what age they're marrying in the next life, mistresses, justifications for that. And that was kind of the thrust of last time. So this we look at. Oh, we've got another one. Okay. Yep. This time we'll start with adultery, but then we get into different kinds of lusts that people can fall into. So we'll start here. This is CL 478. No one who judges of it only on the basis of outward appearances can know there is any evil in adultery. For in outward appearances, it bears resemblance to a marriage. When internal qualities are mentioned and those superficial judges are told that external actions draw their goodness or evil from them, they say to themselves, what are internal qualities? Who sees them? Is this not something that transcends the realm of anyone's intelligence? Carries on. The angels next asked them whether they saw anything good in marriage or anything evil in adultery. They replied that they saw no rational evil or good. When asked whether they saw anything sinful in the latter, they said, in what respect? Is not the act the same? The angels were stunned at these responses and exclaimed, oh, how extraordinary and how great the grossness of the age. When they heard that, the hundreds of the wise assembled turned around and guffawing said to each other, is this grossness? What possible wisdom is there to convince us that to make love to another's wife is deserving of eternal damnation? So I found it interesting in the sense that this is kind of the conversation people have today around sexual relations. They're not realizing there's anything internal to it other than just an act. You know, oh, it's two people performing an act. What difference does anything else make? And the angels are clearly unimpressed with that kind of logic. One of the points we were trying to make last time is that the writings make a case for sexual relations inside of marriage and how holy and sacred and all that is. And the opposite of that is sexual relationships outside of marriage. So sometimes in the world today, we get stuck into this idea of, well, you know, oh, well, this is sex before marriage, or this is same-sex relations, these kind of other things. And we tend to categorize them differently. But the writings basically put them all under the same umbrella of no, this is all unchaste love. It's outside of marriage. It shouldn't be happening, you know, no matter what. Then you get into the kind of conversation about, well, what's the ramifications of these different things if you do? But in totality, they're all classed as things you shouldn't be doing. The writings do give us kinds of adultery. So you may have come across these before. Simple adultery, it's an unmarried man with a married woman or vice versa. The double is two married people, and triple with close blood relatives. I don't see that in the world today, thankfully. There's a whole list here about the degrees. So not only can you have different kinds, but you can have different degrees of adultery. So you can see it's, you know, adulteries of ignorance, adulteries of lust is that second degree. And what's important on the second one, I think, is committed by people who are indeed able to consult the intellect, but for reasons of circumstance at the moment cannot. So sounds like, you know, heat of the moment kind of thing. Somebody makes a mistake. Still bad, but not as bad as it could be. Third degree, adulteries of reason, which are committed by people who intellectually persuade themselves that they are not sinful evils. That's what we're seeing in that memorable relation. Oh, this is fine. Fourth degree is purposeful evil. It's not only not sinful, but it's allowable and pleasurable. And I think what I want you to take out of here is it's a common theme throughout the writings that you can commit an evil and it cannot be too bad, but where things start getting to be really bad is when our mind, our intellectual side, signs off on it. So that's the next thing. It's like, this is okay. And that makes it to where you own it more. If at least, it's like, at least if you're engaging in this practice and going, I shouldn't be doing this, that's a much better place, much safer place for you to be.
Someone once told me the worst evil is self-justification.
Yeah, I think the writings go along with that. It takes you to a bad place. But even then, you have to acknowledge it as an evil and then kind of contort it. If you're innocently doing it, there's still some protection there. I think I showed this one to you last time, the same quote, but it was in a different spot. I think it's worth keeping in mind here that adultery does not undo marriage because it cannot be undone, but it closes it off. So it's following the pledge and the covenant, the conjugal love of one man with one wife unites their souls. I find that fascinating because you're certainly allowed to be divorced, but it's telling us here that there's something that just, it's always there. I mean, I guess you see this to a certain extent, like, when a couple gets divorced, they still have to interact if they have kids together, right? There's still a connection with that person. We've seen that plenty of times. But what I found interesting about this one is it's not following the physical consummation of the relationship. It's about following the pledge and the covenant. Let me see if I can mute them. No, we don't have to hear them. So, Margaret and Gay, if you actually want to chime in with any comments, just unmute yourselves because I just muted you. So background noise doesn't jump onto our screen. Yeah, worth keeping in mind. Again, this is an afterlife kind of comment here. The spirit wished to reason out whether so, but I told him that truth is not subject to lines of reasoning. For reasonings incline the delights of the flesh, which oppose the delights of the spirit, because the flesh does not know what the latter delights are like. Rather, you ought first to consider the things I had said, because they were true. So this is, again, that standard battle. We try to self-justify, we try to find reasons to make what we're doing okay. And the key line for me here is that the reasonings inclined to delight to the flesh, right? We reason, we make justifications to enjoy our flesh because the flesh does not know what the latter delights are like. The flesh doesn't know what the spiritual delights are like. Yeah. I think this is what we fight in the church world. It's trying to convince people that the delights of the spirit are better than the delights from the flesh when they know the delights of the flesh are fun, right? This is good, right? Feels good, must be good, but that's not how it works. It continues, or he should think in accordance with that familiar principle which is very well known in the world, that no one ought to do to another what he would not want another to do to him. Consider, for example, if someone were to have seduced his wife in this way, a wife he loved, as is the case of every marriage in the beginning. So I guess what Swedenborg's trying to tell us is that if we feel like there's a person who's justifying adultery, well, how would you feel like if somebody seduced your wife? Yeah, I guess. I'm not sure how much weight that carries with someone who's into that kind of life. There are some examples about what a second-degree adultery looks like. If a wanton wife employs her wiles to captivate a man's heart, enticing him into her bedroom and setting him on fire until he loses his judgment, and the more so if she also then threatens him with disgrace if he does not comply. So too, if some wanton wife is skilled in sorcery and witchcraft, or uses potions to kindle a man, so the heat of the flesh deprives his intellect of its freedom of reason. Likewise, if a man uses sweet enticements to seduce another's wife, until her will is so on fire that she is unable any longer to resist. Which may be add other similar examples. I mean, it says sorcery and witchcraft. It's not just taking marijuana, I don't think. But I don't think that's an unfair piece to it as well. You know, some guy slips some girl some drugs, you know, she's not necessarily responsible for what happens. That's fair, but
It's not as part of his wife.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, Potiphar's wife, you're right.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, part of his wife.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Although he didn't lose his judgment.
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
That's what she was doing.
She was trying.
Enticements weren't good enough point. Well, actually, that's a wrong answer because he was
Joseph.
he was not for breaking.
Correct.
Yeah,
Joseph
right.
was a man of integrity.
Yeah.
Well, I think perhaps the lesson is that Joseph stopped it before he got to the place where he couldn't say no anymore.
Right.
You know, okay, I see what you want. I'm getting out now. But yeah, look, what I find interesting about this, though, is going back to the last one, which was, I know, 2 months ago, we don't remember that. But there were plenty of examples of, you know, mistress prostitution, stuff like that, where the writings lay out what I'd say practicalities. Okay, you know, we can forgive this under these practical circumstances. You know, one of them being, oh, the kid has to go to get educated and learn the ways of the world. We can't expect him to hold out until he's married if he's got to wait a long time to get married. So it was acknowledging that there are the body has its desires, shall we say. And that's the deal with the prostitution. And that was the deal with the mistresses, that, well, the body has its desires. And yes, if your wife, for whatever reason, you know, what was the word? Eructations was the famous word from last time. She has these eructations and she's ill and all these things. Well, then under that circumstance, then you can do it. It's not ideal, but we can work with this. And those were all examples of people who weren't married. Now we're into adultery where people, or at least one of the people is married. And it's saying, well, you know, there's some leeway here too. But here we go back to the intellectual side. Adulteries committed by such people are imputable to them according as their intellect afterwards sanctions them or does not sanction them. In the measure that the intellect sanctions evils, in the same measure does the person assimilate them into himself and make them his own. To sanction them means to assent to them, and to assent induces on the mind a state of love for those evils. It is the same with adulteries, which in the beginning were committed without the assent of the intellect, but which afterwards are sanctioned. Contrary is the case if they are not afterwards sanctioned. So we run into this problem of committing a sin, and then what do we do with it? Okay, I've been a bad person. So what, you have two options to either say, yep, I've been bad, I shouldn't have done that, or nope, that was fine. You know, my partner deserted me, or my partner this, you know, blame it on somebody else. Or this is the same act as in marriage. You know, that's the example the writings give. There are all sorts of ways to find a way to justify it. And we've been told we find ways to justify the pleasures of the flesh and ignore that there's something internal going on. So I think, yeah, what I'd like you to walk away with here is to the extent that the intellect sanctions them is a kind of a threshold to making it better or worse. If you justify it and say it's okay, then you've just made yourself into a worse space. It's better just to say, I shouldn't have done this. Again, why defending is easy? It says it is possible for everyone to defend evil as easily as good. Likewise, falsity as easily as truth. The defending of evil is also perceived as more pleasing than the defending of good. And the affirmation of falsity appears as more enlightened than the affirmation of truth. That is because any defense of evil and falsity draws its reasonings from the pleasures, gratifications, appearances, and fallacies of the bodily senses, whereas the defense of good and truth draws its reasons from a realm above the sensual elements of the body.
Can I interrupt here?
Sure.
What about older people who've been married, perhaps, or not been married, as the case may be, who've been celibate for years, perhaps, and then meet somebody in later life and develop a friendship, but I'm not sure about marriage. And we're talking, you know, in our 70s, 80s.
Okay. So can somebody who's in their 70 and beyond enter into a physical relationship with somebody else without getting married? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. And neither of them, say neither of them are married.
Well, look, that would fall under the classification of fornication.
Yeah.
And is it that bad? No, I think the general idea is you want restraint over relaxation of rules. So if you're in a relationship with somebody, well, that's better than it just being, say, a one-night fling where you're changing partners every week.
Yeah.
So that's preferable to that. If you're looking towards a committed relationship with that person, even if it's not marriage per se, that's a better place than the alternative.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody goes to hell over fornication. It's but the fabric of heaven, we're told, is conjugal love. So I guess you just got to be careful where that path is taking you.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I, you know, I suppose we all know people who've are in that category, such as life now, that it seems to be normal, who may eventually get married.
Yep.
And with their monogamous relationships, there's no reason why they can't get married, or maybe there are extenuating family reasons why they can't.
sure.
But in every other sense, they have a conjugal relationship.
Right. Yeah, well, this is the thing about academic conversations, and that I think the writings make a clear case that there's something more when the promise and covenant are made. I mean, it does something to solidify the relationship in a way that just going through the motions doesn't. So I think there is something there to actually getting married that people miss out on if they don't. But at the same time, if like you're saying, they're living the conjugal relationship as far as all the actions of life goes, they're not opposed to marriage, right?
No.
And that's what the writings. I'll unshare so you can actually be seen. Of course, I can't make you get larger. I tried.
Don't worry.
Yeah, all right.
Licentious.
I'm not doing it right, whatever it is I'm doing. But
I'll turn it off, Kat.
no, that's fine. Yeah, I think ultimately we just, oh, there it is, the stop share button. That's the obvious one. There we go. Yeah, there you are. So yeah, it's about, hell is about opposition to marriage. And I think in the relationship you're describing, people aren't opposed to marriage.
No.
So it's one of those things where I don't think you recommend it as an ideal, but I also think it doesn't really take you take you to the hellish outcome either. And that's what the new church talks about, right? We have these degrees of heaven. We have 3 heavens, and we have all these layers of heaven between those heavens. And it's just, this is one of the things the Lord teaches in his ministry in the New Testament, right? There's an ideal, right? But there's also what he's willing to accept too.
Yeah.
I think he's willing to accept if 2 people in their 70s have a physical relationship without getting married. I don't think that's the end of the world.
Mm. So how do you go when they're younger and when they're younger and they're trying to work out their sexuality? I know this is slightly off this case, but encouraging them to read the Bible when they've never been brought up with any religious input.
Yeah, well, it can be difficult. The Bible isn't itself the easiest place to start with if you're trying to sort that question out.
No.
There's lots of negative experiences that happen there, from rape and incest and all sorts of nasty stuff. So if you don't have some sort of a bearing on an internal sense, just the Bible on itself is a tricky place to start.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, if I'm teaching somebody who's young on stuff like this, it's trying to appeal to common sense. I don't feel like I need theology to prove to somebody, hey, your body is made a certain way, therefore, you're a girl and your femininity is based on not just a physical body, but your spirit, right? You have a spiritual cause that creates a body to reflect your inner self, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're a woman, not just in your X and Y chromosomes, but you're a woman to the deepest part of your soul. And that's expressed by the way a woman's body is different than a man's. So you have that kind of idea for that. And then I think some of it just comes down to teaching people the experience of life, saying, well, hey, look, you know, when people engage in sexual relationships, it changes that relationship. You know, if you start sleeping with somebody, you have a different connection to them, and it muddies the brain. And that's what the writings are talking about here is if a young girl starts sleeping with a guy, she has to be aware that it's going to change her connection to that guy and harder to rid herself of that connection if she gets involved.
Mm,
So,
that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
you know, and in particular for the woman, you know, the writings talk about a woman becomes a wife when she receives the man's, what's she called? The appropriation of his manhood. That once the woman has the man's soul in her body floating around in there, it changes her. And I think that's one of the big things that young women in the new church need to be told is that, you know, be careful, you know, because
It makes me mindful of that poor girl who was murdered by her husband and the 3 children as well up in Queensland. And I think, what was that relationship like right at the beginning, and then got so perverted? But she was too fearful to get out of it. I mean, she's just one of many cases like it where, but it's interesting the way you've described a female mind being appropriated by the male mind.
yeah, it's yeah. Once that connection happens, you know, it talks about the man's seed is this holy object, and it contains his soul in it. So once she receives it, you know, it changes her. You know,
Yeah.
it's not to say that, oh my gosh, at that moment, you know, they have to be connected together forever. But I think it creates a connection, and you know, evidence I think supports that.
Yeah. Well, connections are harder to break than just friendships.
Right. So it just, you know, there's something spiritual going on. That's what the earlier quotes we were showing were about, that people need to realize that sexual activity isn't just a physical motion, but that there's something deeper and more internal going on than just having a good time in between the sheets.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful who you pick, because you're going to be connected to that person in some way or another, depending on how you go.
Mm. I've been assailed lately by all manner of different, just being aware of other people in different circumstances of LGBTQI, you know, men that want to dress like women. Where does it end? I mean, it just gets more and more extreme.
Yep. Well, that's the sign of lust, right? Because all hellish loves have no end. That's right. They just keep getting more and more extreme. It's like the Swedenborg talks about it being like a fire. It just gets out of there, it gets out of control, and just keeps on consuming. So yes, you're right. It does get more extreme. And I'm curious to see if there'll ever be a stop. You know, at what point do people say, no, we're not supporting this?
Yeah.
But what's happening is people are divorcing the idea that there's something internal to these actions other than just a fleshly desire.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And that's why what this back half of Conjugial Love is important, because it's kind of saying, look, there is something internal and there are eternal consequences to getting involved in this stuff.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like that quote I was just had up there about the defending evil. I'm gonna put that screen back up there. So I want to make this point again. Share that. defending of evil is perceived as more pleasing than defending of good. And where was it? It's talking about it being more enlightened. Oh yeah, here it is. And the affirmation of falsity appears as more enlightened than the affirmation of truth. That's what's going on in the world today, right? Oh no, you guys are just traditionalists. Your teachings, your ideas, you're out of date. You're out of date. You got to get with the times, man.
Yeah.
And they try to come off as more enlightened than those of us who see the simple truth that it's a man and a woman as husband and wife, not a guy and a guy or a girl and a girl. So yeah, got to watch out for that stuff because they are trying to come off as more enlightened, and they will definitely look down their noses at you if you don't buy into the propaganda.
There's probably quite a variation between people that might be curious versus somebody who's really into it, sort of thing.
For sure.
What did Owen say?
Owen's saying that there's definitely a range of behaviors from somebody who's curious about it versus somebody who's, deep into the lifestyle. And that's true.
Yeah, about attention.
But, the problem is once you open your mind to some of these things, it's easier for the door to be opened further and get into it and justify it. Oh, well, this is okay. It's not so bad. And most of the reasoning seems to be a fleshy, earthy style reasoning. Oh, well, they're not hurting anybody. Oh, that's just the way they feel. That's the way they were born. All this kind of stuff. And not looking at anything that's talks about along the lines of the message from the Bible. That's you have to be born again, right? So yeah, somebody may be born with a tendency towards a behavior. That's fair. But the whole message of Scripture is to be born again and be, hoping that the second time you're born, you'll have a better outcome.
Yeah. Or at least try to be born again.
That's right. Well, yeah, you got to get on the path. You don't have to complete the process, but you do have to be on the path.
Yeah.
So this is the next quote here from CL 495 about where this leads. And it says, a person is human and distinguished from an animal by the fact that his mind is divided into 3 planes, and by the fact that he can be elevated to become an angel. Adulterers of the 3rd and 4th degree are those who are utterly natural and become progressively sensual and carnal for the reason that they have immersed the love of their will, and together with it then their intellect in the unclean perversions of licentious love, and taken delight in them, as unclean birds and beasts do in putrid and fecal matters, as though they were exquisite and desirable treats. For vaporous exhalations rising up from the flesh in them fill the habitation of the mind with their impurities and cause the will not to perceive anything more exquisite and desirable. And to me, this is an important point because, again, the world today likes to make the claim that we're just animals. Oh, it's just natural. We're just like animals, and
It's natural.
yeah,
It's spiritual.
that's right. It's natural, not spiritual. And so, yeah, when we just follow that path, well, what are we doing? We're becoming more sensual, becoming bodily minded. So it's not a good place to be. The next section that we're going to get into here is about the lust too. There's a few different ones of these. There's the lust to deflower, the lust of stealing innocence, the lust to rape. I'm missing one. Anyway, we know what these lusts are, so I don't want to get into the gory details. That's unpleasant.
When we get down to the cell, is there any way of lighten the guilt. I mean, when you look at that,
Yep.
I think, well, we're down to rock bottom now.
Yep.
And so any circumstance, extenuating, right,
Mhm.
circumstances that might make those not as bad.
So I don't know if you heard that, those of you online, Owen's basically asking, when we get to this point in the progression downwards, are there anything that creates extenuating circumstances, any way to lighten the guilt, to make it not so bad? Well, I think part of the answer is in this slide here. It says, the lusts described in the following 4 chapters not only are lusts of adultery, but they are still more grave, since they do not arise except in consequence of adulteries, being embraced after adulteries become tiresome. So, I mean, this is, like you're saying, way down the bottom here. You know, you've already gone into the adulteries, and I'm done with that. I'm going to the next level down. So,
It's pretty intentional, so I think it's pretty bad.
yeah, it's I'm not seeing a whole lot of, wiggle room.
It's not always connected with adultery.
Well, but see, that's the thing.
Young guy who's not married or whatever, it's still deflower.
Well,
Correct.
Isn't that what they're
And
talking? It's that as well.
but yeah, see, that's different. I think,
So this is all connected with adulteries, is it? This
yeah,
one,
I think this section it's explicitly stating they don't come around until the adulteries become tiresome. So yes, a young man can deflower a young girl, and that's really more fornication.
and it's not the lust to deflower, I think.
Well, it
Right.
can be.
Yes,
Well,
it can be, but I think that does fall into a different category.
Yeah, just back to
Yeah,
the
so
word intention.
Yeah.
Yep. It's
Lust,
still,
lust would seem to have much more intention in it,
Yeah.
a deeper kind of intention than fornication.
correct.
You know, always fascinates me, just to take those 2 words, the way we actually say it, lust, it's very front of the mouth, but fornication takes more effort, and therefore it's signifying something deeper. No, I've got the argument the wrong way around.
Yeah, you
That's
do.
interesting.
Yeah, an interesting observation, but yes, I think it's backwards.
Well, so this kind of gives another part to Owen's question here. It says, those who persuade themselves that the lust of the flower is not a sinful evil, after death suffer a grievous fate. After they have passed through the first period of time in the world of spirits, they are then propelled from their outward qualities into their inward ones, and so into the lusts which had consumed them in the world. They are thus propelled into their lusts in order that it may be seen to what degree that they have been caught up in them. And this to the end that if it was to a minor degree, after having been propelled into them, they may be delivered from them and filled with shame. So
Hopefully that's the young guys who are lusting to deflower. Not the ones who progressed past adultery. They would be more intentional.
well, but that's not how I'm reading it. I mean, you know, they've persuaded themselves the lust of the flower is not sinful, right? They've done that, and yet, if they go through this vastation process in the next life and be let into what's really going on, they can be pulled out of it. And I think that's, that's the key piece. And that's true with all these evils, right? Doesn't matter if it's sexual or not. It's to the extent that you go, oh, all right, that wasn't any good. I can see that now.
But are we at that state do we have to be at that state before we die, or can we turn the corner in the world of spirits.
The way this reads to me is you can turn the corner in the world of spirits.
Yeah, that's the way it's looking to me as well.
Yep. So, you know, but right, the mercy of the Lord, Margaret says,
Yeah.
and that's right. I do think in general, we don't give the Lord enough credit for being as merciful as He is.
Is my arm that short?
Well, that's a different one, but the
Wow.
But there are also instances when people, they are hideously addicted to something,
yep,
but do everything they can to fight against it, but really just can't overcome it.
correct.
They may lessen it,
Yep.
that addiction, but it's still there to the very end. And
Yep.
so if they were propelled into them again in the world of spirits, it's, well, it's quite uplifting to think that they can then have the safety to feel the shame of it or be released from it when they've done everything in their power to try and overcome it, but it's just been too great.
Right. And in that person, they're probably not intellectually assenting to it, which we've shown is a key piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
If somebody's, you know, an alcoholic or whatever, you know, they can't get free of it, but they are still acknowledging to the day they die, oh, this wasn't right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a much better place to be than the opposite.
Yes.
So, you know, it does show we can be pretty bad, but the thing that makes me squirm about this kind of teaching is, you know, we go, oh, okay, good, they can be saved in the next life. Well, maybe, you know, you know, it's not a slam dunk that they're going to actually be free of it. We don't know their internal state any more than we know anybody else's, but so we're stuck in a position of not knowing how to see things other than this. Well, we'll get to teaching in a minute about how the writings say to hold these things, but I guess I wouldn't go around promoting to people who are stuck in bad behavior. Oh, well, you know what? You might figure it out in the next life. You know, I don't think that's good advice.
No.
These vastation processes are no fun. They're unpleasant, and it's better to rid yourself of this stuff in this life than wait to the next.
Mm.
This passage goes on, so let me finish this. It says, however, those who had been caught up in this malevolent lust to the point that they felt its delight as exquisite, and who boasted about their thefts as over rich spoils, do not allow themselves to be withdrawn from them. Therefore, they are let go to do as they please, and they immediately wander about them, looking for brothels, which they also enter when these are pointed out to them. The brothels are situated on the peripheries of hell. But when they encounter only prostitutes there, they leave and ask where they may find virgins.
Yeah.
At that point, they are then taken to harlots, who are able by mirage to assume exceptional beauty and a rosy, girlish charm, and to pass themselves off as virgins, for whom they conceive a passionate ardor like that which they had felt in the world. They come to an arrangement with these women, therefore, but when they are about to consummate the arrangement, the mirage assumed from heaven is removed, and the alleged virgins are seen in their ugliness, monstrous and dark. If they are compelled to remain with them for a while, harlots of this sort are called sirens. And I think it goes one more. Yep. After that, if these men do not allow themselves to be withdrawn from that insane lust of theirs by such beguilements, they are cast down into a hell which is located on the border between the south and west, beneath the hell of harlots, more cunning still, and there they are associated with their like. I have also been granted to see them in that hell, and was told that I was told that many of them there come from noble stock and the wealthier classes. Yet because they had been of the character that they were in the world, all memory of their lineage and the standing they had because of their wealth is taken away. And they have instilled in them the persuasion that they were lowly bond servants and so unworthy of any respect.
What
So-
a downfall.
Yeah, it's not painting a rosy picture, is it? So I don't think we want to bank on the idea that somebody's going to change their life. I mean, it's certainly possible. And that's kind of one of the things that we're left to wonder, right? Somebody's entering into bad behavior. Well, are they going to be able to change? If you have a lust of the flower, it doesn't look particularly good. I think the key word was what they were boasting. Yeah, they felt its delight as exquisite and boasted about their thefts of rich spoils. Don't allow them to be withdrawn. So,
This is, I think we commented last time is that because Swedenborg was a man, a lot of this reads from a man's point of view.
Mhm.
So if Swedenborg was a woman, how would it be written?
yeah, I mean, I think there's fairness to say that Swedenborg was a guy and therefore it's a certain point of view. And yet, at the same time, if you look at the world, I mean, most of the sexual crimes are committed by men, not by women. You don't see too many stories of women going around raping men. I'm sure it happens, but I feel like this is pointed more towards men because men are the perpetrators of these kind of evils. Yeah, and women's evils in the writings have more to do with control and domination and things like that than they do these sexual sins. Yeah, but I there was a guy I met years ago. He was a camp leader at one of the new church camps. And his take on it was, well, if the Lord, he wants us to procreate. So he sets up men to have that drive to always be ready for that moment when the woman is. It's like he equated it to like a delivery service. He's like, all right, we're ready. Whenever you are, I'm ready. And there's something to it.
And I can imagine there are the women too who do enjoy some of these bad things too, the deflowering and all that, and
Sure.
they would fall into that category too. And they wouldn't necessarily forcefully engage men in things as with their conniving
Yep.
stuff.
Yep. Yeah, prostitutes don't get a good rap, but they're not included in this section. But prostitutes and sirens, I guess that is the categories kind of female perspective sexual sins.
That must be varying a lot too, because there's a trafficking, of course, which of course the girl is forced to.
Sure, yeah. It is.
So that's in one category, but then there must be a range of.
Yeah.
Say, I don't know, this is a good example, but girl's going to university, she hasn't got any money,
Yep.
she drop out and, just try and find some work that maybe doesn't pay enough. And if you supplements her income and so on, so is that extenuating circumstances?
So the question is, what about a young girl who's in university struggling for money? Is it extenuating circumstances to basically become a sex worker, I guess is what you're asking?
Yeah, I guess so.
So the passage that sticks to my mind that talks about this kind of dynamic about young women in prostitution, it basically says that a young woman can get caught up in prostitution, and in the next life, to the extent they've gotten out of it, they can be chastened and kind of cleansed of that, and be okay. But they, again, describe it as a very unpleasant process to go through to rid yourself of that. But it says that the people who are, shall we say, the prostitute managers, the older prostitutes who run the young girls around, those people, he's like, straight to hell, no pass and go, they're done. It's one of the few places where it's like straight to hell. You don't see that often. Even in these deflowerations, there's wiggle room. Oh, but no, if you're the runner of prostitutes,
and he's lonely.
right? Yeah, that doesn't sound like he's gonna have a good fate.
But again, that's what it all comes down to with the Lord, is where our intentions are. And like, I can't judge these people's intentions, and the managers and whatnot. The Lord judges us on our intentions behind all of it.
Yep.
So somebody who's just trying to make
Judge
their way.
ourselves, basically, I guess.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, right.
But I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So
You're in freedom to make decisions and you still pursue it.
Yeah. I feel like the Lord, he wants to give us every chance we can to choose the good route. So that's where I feel like giving that opportunity in the spiritual world to go through that vastation and see where our loves actually lie, he'll give us the chance to get out of it if that's what we truly want.
Yeah. Well, that's a comforting thought for
It
many.
is.
Sure.
yeah, key is we have to want to change.
Yeah.
And the problem is the pleasures can be so great that we decide we don't. We go, oh, this pleasure is great.
Mhm.
So this is if you get stuck into the lust of variety, this is just kind of the after effect. It says people who got caught up in that, their garments are tattered and they wear their breeches drawn up over the belly around the chest because they do not have any loins. The ankles of their feet commence instead from the area just below the belly. The reason is that the loins in human beings correspond to conjugal love, and this is missing in them.
Yeah.
These seem, however, from afar do not appear as human nor as monsters, but as bits of frozen gelatin.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, not a nice outcome. So watch out for that lust for variety.
Now that makes me ask it. Now, why would that correspond to frozen gelatin?
Yeah, right?
See, you see through gelatin. Can if it is just pure gelatin,
Right.
it's opaque at least.
Yeah.
Maybe it can't be melted because it's frozen.
Hmm.
Gelatin, you can.
Yeah, right. I don't know.
That one I had to throw in as a highlight because you don't see that in the writings, right?
Not very often.
And from afar, they look like monsters. From afar, they look like a dog. From afar, they look like a horse, No, from afar, frozen bits of gelatin. That's a good one.
Another class.
That's a good one. Lust to rape, again, another unpleasant one. The cause of the lust comes after conjugal love, and likewise licentious love have become, through the exercises of them, stale. When in order to be reinvigorated, the men wish to be set on fire by absolute efforts as resistance. At resistance.
That's resistance. Yeah.
They have a sick smell in consequence of their having dispelled the conjugal inclination, which is the precious treasure of human life. They are banished to the fringes of the Western zone. At some distance, they appear emaciated, as though consisting of bones covered only by skin, while from afar they look like panthers, which, I don't know, sounds better than frozen bits of gelatin.
Yeah.
So
What shape these bits take?
Yeah, I don't know, but I guess the thing, again, even on rape, I didn't include it in here, but there was interesting paragraph or two that talked about that. It basically said, if a couple puts on an act of resistance, well, that's okay, but you got to watch out that doesn't lead to something else. There's, so like if the wife is playing hard to get, basically that's not uncommon, and it's okay, but yeah, but I kind of found that rather strange. For seducing states of innocence, being men of guile in order to seduce these women, whether nuns or others, they first devise stratagems, and after they have infused their character with them, without restraint of conscience, they put them as though naturally into execution. Their stratagems are principally pretenses of innocence, love, chastity, and piety. By these and other deceptions, they work their way into the women's interior friendship, and so into their love. And by various persuasions and at the same time suggestions, they turn this then from a spiritual love into a natural one, and afterwards by incitements into a fleshly, carnal one, at that point possess them at their pleasure.
That goes back to my first comment, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
So like again, it's about intention, this scenario, right? They devise stratagems. They've got this whole shtick that they are doing to win the woman's trust and friendship, to then turn on them, to take their body and do what they want. So I mean, that's really bad, right? This isn't a teenage romance that's gone wrong, right? This is done intentionally. These people at a distance appear as weasels. They appear as weasels. However, if they have been consumed with guile, they appear at a distance as serpents of various kinds, and the most guileful as vipers. Still in the hell itself, which I was granted to see into, they looked to me as though sickly pale and chalk-faced. Moreover, because they are filled with nothing but lust, they do not like to speak, and if they speak, they only mutter and mumble various things which are not intelligible to any but their companions next to them. But as soon as they sit or stand, they make themselves invisible and flit about in a cavern like ghosts, for they are then in a state of fantasy, and the imagination seems to fly. After flying around, they come to rest, and then surprisingly, they do not recognize one another. The reason for this is they are engrossed in guile, and guile does not acknowledge another's existence, so holds itself aloof. Think about that, right? You're seducing some young woman. Do you really think she has existence? She's an object, right? She is something you're trying to possess. So I thought that was really interesting that, it's a manifestation of that, not acknowledging another's existence. When these spirits sense anything of conjugal love, they flee into underground chambers and hide. They are also without any love for the opposite sex and are figures of utter impotence. They are called infernal genii. So that's, again, an unpleasant end. But here's what I want to show you, what I had completely forgotten, right? So here we've gone through this back part of conjugal love. We've gotten all these bad things that people get involved into and the bad outcomes that they get, right? Frozen gelatin, weasels, vipers, all this stuff, no loins. There's nothing positive being said here. But that's not how the book ends. The book ends, and I think this is what Owen was kind of driving for earlier today about, well, what's the extenuating circumstances, blah, blah, blah. So, all right, this is where Owen gets his moment of answer. Here we go. Swedenborg goes into this whole thing about, well, be careful about what you judge. Says, Lord says, judge not, that you be not condemned. Says, licentious love is imputed, namely, not in accordance with deeds such as they appear in the outward respects before men, but such as they appear in their inner respects before the Lord, and from him before angels, which depends on the nature of the person's will and understanding in the deeds. There are various circumstances in the world which mitigate and excuse offenses, and also which aggravate and worsen them. Even so, however, imputations after death are not made in accordance with circumstances that outwardly surround the deed, but in accordance with the internal circumstances of the mind. All right, this is speaking to exactly what you're asking about, the college girl or whatever. And it's like, well, there are things that aggravate and some things that excuse. And then the book ends with this. Conjugial Love finishes with an account where Swedenborg tells the angels about what he's disclosing to earth, about what happens in the life after death, heaven and hell, degrees of life, degrees of the mind, last judgment. Then he hears a hostile murmur from the people below crying, do miracles and we will believe. Swedenborg says, you're going to harden your hearts like the children of Israel. And from heaven, a declaration comes down saying, if you don't believe Moses and the prophets or the Lord when he was in the world, any further miracles won't change your belief. And that's how it ends. I find it really interesting that he gives this whole thing about the imputation, saying, okay, we've said all these things are bad, and by the way, be careful. I think I don't know if this is just my clergy familiarity or this is common throughout other people's knowledge, but there's a phrase that goes around saying, don't judge, but if your external actions match a person's internal stuff, then you can say that person's not going to do a good place. You got to phrase it like that. If your behavior on the outside is reflective of what's truly on the inside, then that person's not going to go somewhere good. And that concept and that phrase comes from this part in Conjugial Love. So it's this strong warning saying, only the Lord knows what a person's interiors are truly like. Don't judge them, except you can say if their external actions match their internals, then you can say that's not going to be a good end for them. So I felt that was an interesting way to finish that off.
Yeah, that's a good way. You lifted us out of the the depths of hell.
Yeah, quite literally.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah. So there you have it. There's the.
I don't know. It's a meeting close to.
I mean,
It's one example that I don't know whether it was covered in this week or last week, but for like 2 years, my boss was homosexual.
yep.
Really nice guy. Really nice guy. He was married to the same guy for 25 years.
Yep.
All right. So, is this covered? I mean, I would think that.
So you're getting into next month's class.
Oh, thank you for the preview, Owen.
Well, intention, I mean.
Yeah.
They, well, I don't know what his partner was, but this guy, really nice guy, with the same partner,
Yep.
And, you know, if your partner was a female, you'd say perfect marriage, probably.
Right.
So, did we cover that? Because
We did not cover that in these two classes.
no.
We touched on it, I guess, a little bit last time, just in terms of the writing saying that homosexuality is a very bad form of adultery. But we didn't get into the more nuanced kind of stuff that you're asking. And look, it's you're on. You have the pulse of the question, right? In the sense that that's what a lot of people are saying these days. And well, hey, I know somebody who's homosexual. They seem like a nice person. How do we make sense of this? And yeah, that's the conversation. And so last month, June, 2 months ago, there were a number of papers on this as far as how do we see it? How do we hold this? Yeah. And it's that there are a variety of opinions out there. And yeah, it's a big topic. It's definitely pertinent to the world. I think the short answer is the writings don't say it's a good idea. But I think you end up with, just like we saw today, where while there's no homosexuality in heaven, just like there's no adulterers and there's no rapists, yet you can be brought out of that and enter in to the extent that you have a good heart, right? I think that's the short answer to it.
You just might be in the lowest heavens.
So,
Yeah, I mean it's hard to know, right? Because you don't know where that heart is, and maybe they have a great desire to serve the Lord, but for whatever reason, like I'll put on the table like a lot of the stories I hear about gay men is that they've been sexually abused at some point in their life.
Yeah.
And so, well, that falls into that kind of considerations of the world aggravating the situation. So I don't think the Lord's going to hold that against them, right? But then there are these other people who get into a homosexual lifestyle that have a very different way of living that. So yes, I think it's fair to make accommodations and adjustments based on what it is that they're doing and how they're living. It's hard to know based just on the externals. But I guess for me, what it comes down to is if there is not homosexuality in heaven, there is a clear teaching then, right? As in heaven, so upon the earth. So you want to rid yourself of that as best you can. And if you don't, then you're going to get another crack at it in the next life. But those vastation processes can be difficult and painful. And yeah, anyway, that's all next month. Otherwise, we'll go on for another hour.
I want to be part of that, please. Let me know. Keep me on the list.
Great.
All right, we'll keep you on the list. No problem.
Yeah.
All right, well, I guess we'll go have some lunch. Thanks for joining in, Gay.
Thank you. I'm glad I heard about it at the last minute. Thank you, Laurie. Yeah.
All right.
So good to see you.
It's featuring loud and clear in my world at the moment. I can't tell you the number of people that are hooked up into it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll straighten them out.
First of all, straighten out my thinking in it. Anyway, I'll save it for next month.
Next month.
All right.
Yeah, that'll be
Sounds
intriguing.
good.
Love to you and Brian.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. All is well.
Good. Take good care.
Okay. Lots of love, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.